Wait. Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that began when the pandemic started. Our mission has been originally it was to help authors whose tours were canceled and to help independent bookstores whose doors were shuttered and to create a sort of community. And we've continued that mission. So I need to tell you that right now, A Mighty Blaze could use your help to keep the lights on. And we actually have a GoFundMe page, and I've put the GoFundMe into the chat. So you can just click on there. And originally we had all these wonderful things we were going to give you, all this swag for donating, but GoFundMe changed its rules and now they won't let you do that. So what we will give you is, just more and more authors. If there's an author you want to see, let us know. And just more spectacular books. So today's very special. We have Mary Beth Keane here, one of my favorite authors. She wrote Ask Again Yes, which was a sensation, and her new book is The Half Moon. And it's absolutely incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I can't wait to talk about it. I want to tell people to please, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. Don't be shy. Also, please buy The Half Moon, Ask Again Yes, The Fever, and all of Mary Beth's other books, either at bookshop.org. And again, I put the link right in the chat, or at your favorite indie bookstore. We'll all appreciate it. Okay, so Mary Beth Keane attended Barnard College and the University of Virginia, where she received an MFA. She was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for fiction writing and has received citations from the National Book Foundation, PEN America, and the Hemingway Society. She's the author of The Walking People, Fever. I think I reviewed Fever for the Boston Globe.
I believe you did, yeah.
I think I did. I just
and it was a good one, thank God.
Oh, yes. And
here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, very funny. And Ask Again Yes, which spent 8 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. To date, Ask Again Yes has been translated into 22 languages. Okay, so The Half Moon. It's already been named the most anticipated book of the year by Vogue, Entertainment Weekly, Book Page, LitHub, and more. The New York Times raved about it and was talking about how the book is about the small moments that matter. And the New York Times actually has the most beautiful line in a review I've ever heard, that reading this book feels like breathing or living, which is exactly what you want your literature to do. It's got reviews also from Ian Napolitano, who said one of our finest writers on the interior complexities of marriage and family, shines a flashlight on the intricate clockwork of love and longing. Vindela Vita said The Half Moon is one of those rare novels that feels simultaneously classic and contemporary. I could not stop reading. So The Half Moon is about the past, the present, and you could say about the possible future of a marriage in crisis, as Malcolm Gebhardt and his wife Jess struggle through their marital issues. The bar that Malcolm recently purchased is struggling to stay afloat. Plus, he's in a bad money situation. Jess is feeling her youth slip away as the two of them fail to conceive a child. But this is also a book, I think, about how we navigate love, or if we even can surmount issues of class. Jess comes from money, while Malcolm is happy in small-town Gilham. So, Mary Beth, welcome. I'm so excited and happy to have you here. This book as well as Ask Again Yes, both take place in Gilham, which is based on your hometown of Pearl River. I'm really curious why, and then I'm also curious whether you have Malcolm's feelings for his hometown, for your hometown, or Jess's feelings, where she wants to be in the wider world.
Or a combination of both.
A combination of both, right?
Yeah. You mean, why did I set them here? I don't know. I mean, to most of the questions that I get asked, the real answer is I don't know, except there has to be a reason that's sort of subconscious. I mean, this is an interesting place to me. It's so close to New York City. I think we're like 17 miles from the Upper West Side.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I can get to the George Washington Bridge in like 12 minutes flat, but it feels more upstate in some ways. Like it feels further. It's like my husband said once, it's like everyone here is looking north instead of south, and we're north of the city. So there are a lot of commuters into the city. It's like a lot of police officers, firefighters and nurses and first responders and that sort of thing. And so we're like of the city, but not really of the city. And so that's
Okay.
a strange, way to live, I guess. There's a lot of immigrants here. My parents were immigrants, and so were most of my friends' parents. And it's a small town in so many ways, next to and surrounded by these big, more famous places like Westchester, Manhattan. And so it's an interesting place to me. Class is a big interest of mine through all of my books, and I think I'll always be looking at work and how much what we do for a living does or does not define us. And I think this is a good place to look at those things.
That's a really interesting thing you just said about work, which was actually one of my next questions. How it does or does not define us, and what work does for us, and how we can separate out from work without being swallowed up by it. It's interesting in the novel because Jess never makes partner in her law firm, which is really terrible. And Malcolm's whole dream is, this bar, and he thinks that's going to make him happy. So I want to know, first of all, like, how does that resonate for you personally? I mean, you're a very successful writer right now. What's your relationship to that as your work? And did you ever hold a job anyplace else? And what was your what was your relationship to that like?
I mean, I always worked from the time I actually had like fake working papers and worked at this office. It was like a very corporate environment when I was like 13, 14, 15. I
Wow.
was doing data entry because our neighbor was like the North American manager of something. And I think I decided young, I am never going to do this full time. Like, this is a terrible way to live. I mean, the job itself was not a good job. So I wasn't really getting a real insight into what it would be like to have a career that required going into an office. But, it's weird for me, as you understand, writing. I am right. It's such a part of my identity of my life. Like, it's not like something I'll ever retire from.
Right.
It's like retiring from reading. Would you ever do that?
Right.
There's sort of two
No.
sides of the same coin. So I think in a way that made me interested in what other people end up doing. What would it be like to have, I mean, this job that I have, um, it has been, I've been very lucky. And there have been years that were really, really difficult, but I still knew what I wanted to do, so what it would be like to kind of fall into a career and end up being that career for 40 years is something I guess I wanted to take a look at, because so many people are depressed or sort of end up in a life that they kind of didn't remember choosing, which I
Right.
could see happening really easily. Next thing you're 25 years in and you're like, how do I get over to that lane? How do I get to that street? I'm on this street, and it's a really hard thing to do.
I know, I know. I find it incredibly interesting what people do for work. And I also found it incredibly interesting when I had a job, how other people reacted to me when I left because I had sold a book. It's kind of a different mindset. And most of the people I worked with were not really happy in their jobs. They just
Yeah.
sort of, that was what they did.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you again about that. Just wonderful New York Times quote about how your book is about the small moments that bind us. And I always feel that that's what writers should do, to create fiction so immersive and so alive that we feel that we're in that world. So I wanted to know, and I agree with this, that small moments can mean and often do mean so much more than the big moments. You don't need a novel to have car crashes or whatever else to really move us and get deep inside of us. So I wanted to know, why do you think the small moments do mean so much more? And are those the kinds of moments that you yourself pay more attention to?
That's a good question. I mean, all of your questions are sort of related to one another. In a way, it's related to the work question, if I'm going to be articulate about this, I guess. Like, so my dad was a sandhog. He was a New York City tunnel worker. The first time
Wow.
the first time anyone ever asked me in my life what my father did for a living was when I got to Barnard, which was a place that I love and I'm very grateful to, because I'm not sure I'd be a writer if it weren't for, the education I got there. But it was also a place of great money, and there was so
Right. Yeah.
much. And I had been taught growing up, you never ask what a person does for a living, because you don't know what it might be. If they're not, that there would be shame associated, but it's just not something you talked about.
Right.
If
Okay.
someone was whatever it might be, you can't ask. It's private, and it felt very, very aggressive to me. And so I think the small moments sort of grew out of this idea that we keep so much to ourselves, and I think we reveal ourselves most in our weird little habits and our small injuries, our hurts that maybe come even as a surprise to us, and that maybe we feel like we don't have the fluency in that sort of language to talk about. And so I like writing in the third person for that reason, because I think in the first person, which I've tried many times, I just can't get close enough, because to write in the first person, at least the way I've tried doing it, even if you have a very unreliable narrator, you still have to know things. The character has to know things about him or herself. And my favorite type of character is the one that is either lying to himself or lying to herself, or is hiding things from herself. And I know what those things are, and the reader will through those, like, tiny micro moments where we betray ourselves, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I think strongly it is those. It's there was something I read that you said that it's about the ordinary moments that become extraordinary. And there are moments like that. And if once you realize that, you can start to notice them all the time.
Yeah.
Just in the way somebody touches somebody else, for example. I want to talk about, there's so much loveliness in the novel about time and aging and what we hope to do and what happens to us instead. Someone in the novel remarks that Jess and Malcolm were like the prom king and queen, the couple who had everything. And I love that line, because that line always, it sort of creates an image of what this couple is like, even though, of course, they have many, many depths. So as you get older, what you want changes. And I wanted to ask you, because I felt like The Half Moon was such a perfect title, because first of all, there's motion. It's moving from half moon to full moon to quarter moon to whatever. And also that it's half in light, but you could also see it half in darkness. So my first question is, am I finding symbolism where you didn't intend it with the half moon?
Yes. I mean, it works. I mean, I guess it works for a reason. Maybe that's why it resonated with me, but I just thought it was a great name for a bar. And it's the name of Hudson's ship. Henry Hudson's, when he, discovered and went out
Right.
the river, he was on the Half Moon. And so there are quite a few places in the Hudson Valley named the Half Moon. But yeah, I mean, all of those things crossed my mind eventually, but I'd have to admit that my first response was not one. I don't think about symbolism or metaphors or anything like that when I'm writing at all. And so I think sometimes they come out despite myself, but no, I wasn't thinking about any of that.
Okay. The book has a miraculous time scheme. It winds in and out of the past events and the present, which is very tightly constructed for 1 week of where there's a blizzard and electricity's going out and there's all this dramatic weather. But it does it really seamlessly. So I was very curious about, did you figure out the time scheme before you started writing, or did it evolve organically? How do you work that out when you write?
So my first 3 books were set over, like, a huge expanse of time, like 45 years. And all I knew when I was setting out to write this book was that I wanted it to be set over a shorter period, something more limited, a week. And so beyond that, I didn't know what the structure would be. I think the nature of my writing, because of those little moments that you mentioned, sometimes in order for those to have any weight, the reader needs to know certain things from further in the past. So I did end up going back. I don't like flashbacks in general. So I just set the story back there. And I just, that's something you feel out in the drafting process. Like, there's something missing here. I don't really write necessarily in order. So I'll have a bunch of chapters and I'll be like, you know what? I need a chapter between A and B. I need like a chapter over here between chapters 5 and 6. And then I sort of like grow it this way and this way at the same time.
Mhm.
And so that evolves. I mean, I would say structure and point of view are my two biggest struggles when I'm writing, and that's why I end up writing so many drafts. Um,
How many
but
drafts? How many
oh
drafts do you
God, I
write?
don't know. I don't keep drafts. I don't save them. I don't like do that cut and paste thing where I keep parts of them. I just write over and over and over the
Over and
same.
over again.
Um, just because I don't know, that just never worked for me. But I yeah, I mean, I just keep feeling it out. It sort of sounds like, sort of hippy dippy, but a lot of my writing I do, I think, from the gut, and I just feel it. If I'm
Right.
bored when I'm writing, I assume the reader's bored reading. And so then I try to like take a step back, go back, try a different structure, try a different point of view, or like sometimes point of view people think whose brain are we in, but sometimes I mean like camera distance too. Are we like bird's eye? Are we worm's eye?
Right.
Where
Right.
you know, there. But all of that takes trial and error for me. I really
Okay.
admire the writers who outline. I think that sounds like a dream, but I just can't do it.
So I read an interview where you talked about how you write your way back to quality sentences. How do
Mhm.
you know when there's a quality sentence, and how do you write your way back to it? Are you just like rewriting and rewriting and rewriting?
I mean, I think we all know, right? When we're just phoning it in, if there's a sentence
Right.
that's like, that's a competent sentence. This is a competent chapter. But is that what we want? And I think, it has to like light you up. I studied with Deborah Eisenberg in at UVA, and she used to have this expression that it eventually has to shoot up to heaven, you know, and she didn't mean it in any religious sense, but it has to do something to you, and I think if I have a couple days where I just know it's all fine, I'm accumulating words, I try to step back and read something that's like that I really, really admire, and sort of remind myself where I want my bar to be, whether I reach it or not, I don't know, but I'll Open Ground by Seamus Heaney is one of my like touchstones. I'll just open it anywhere, read one poem very slowly many times, and just try to look at what he does with language, or the other day I opened The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. Anywhere, I'm like in the middle of the book and
Right.
I just read
Right.
2 paragraphs, and I'm like, this she's just getting people across the room from A to B, but it's still a relentless pursuit of prose and
Right.
efficiency, and it's like a reset button every once in a while that I need to hit.
I love that. A relentless pursuit of prose. That's great. So there's another brilliant line in the book where Jess is talking to her husband and she says, "Remember the pub that had this menu and they kept the same food, but they changed the font and everyone lost their
Yeah,
mind."
yeah,
And I thought, that's really about where our attention goes when we're in what our perception of things are, and that they may not have changed, but we're worrying about them so much that they do change. So I wanted to know if you could talk about that as it refers to Jess and Malcolm and their relationship, because there were times where I felt like they were looking at each other and seeing the different font, but they
yeah,
weren't seeing that the food items were still the same.
right. I mean, I think this is the heart of the book. It's a question. I mean, I wrote a lot of this book during COVID, during lockdown, and I felt a little guilty. People were on Twitter and Facebook and saying, "I can't write right now, it's all," and I understood that, and I felt like a complete sociopath that I could. And in fact, I found myself sort of retreating into it. I had these noise canceling headphones, and I would just close the door for 2 hours. The kids were doing school from wherever, my husband was home, and I would write, but we're all together in this house having our own, like, lonely experience apart from each other. And so when I imagine just a couple sort of locked down, locked in this groove, he wants one thing, she wants another thing. I mean, you begin a relationship. I got married at 25, and you think it's like a fever, like Johnny Cash would say. It was like you
Right.
think love is enough. It's such a powerful, powerful emotion. But it really, after 20 years or however long they've been married, It's not quite enough. You at one point, especially if you're in like a financially precarious position, you're pursuing dreams, but you can't pursue all of them,
Right.
if you also need to feed yourself. And so decisions end up, there's small cuts. A reviewer said something about small cuts, and I thought that was a really way of putting it. That's just really good way. It just gets relentless. And if they add up and there's no store of love left, then you're in trouble. If there is, it's worth fighting for, I think. And so they had to just sort of wake up and pay attention. But the snowstorm in the book and them locked in place, I think I would never say this is a COVID book, but it was born out of that. I think this like, is my experience the same as your experience? Is what you want the same as what I want? Like, I want out of here, and you want to double down and stay. It just was like no one was right in their minds, I think, in that period. At least I wasn't. And
No,
we surprised
it's too
ourselves.
weird.
Some reactions by people, including myself, surprised me. If you were to tell me on paper what was going to happen and I predicted the way I would be and the way I would feel, I don't think it would line up with how I actually felt. So, it's all in this book.
That's
Hidden.
interesting. We actually have a lot of audience questions, but I have to ask my questions first. We'll take audience questions at 4:30. So there's another great line in the book where people are talking about the difference between something that's almost too late or in the nick of time. And it's the same sort of thing that I was asking about before. It's like, how do we approach our lives? Do we take action, or are we too slow and we miss that moment that might lead to something else? And I wanted to know like how that fits in with how Malcolm and Jess are dealing with their lives, because I don't want to give anything away, but Jess has something that she really wants. And then she sees a situation which might give her what she wants, which seems like, oh, in the nick of time. But instead, to me, that situation turned into, it could have been too late if she had gone through that.
Right.
Do you think everybody does that?
I'm not sure. I think of Jess as a problem solver, and every moment she's in this book, she's trying to solve problems in a way. Malcolm, in some ways, is more, he's a very affable person. He's easier. But that part of things, I mean, it comes from me. I'm sure it comes from the people I'm around. You do wonder. I feel extraordinarily lucky almost all the time because I'm doing the thing that I wanted to do when I was like 11
Right.
years old. I married my high school sweetheart. We're very happy. Our boys are healthy. It's all good, but we still have moments, I'm sure. And we're obviously very close. We talk about it, my husband and I, like, you think, what if I had, even things like, what if I had majored in whatever?
Right.
What if I had, where would I be? What would I be doing? In my case, I just don't believe I'd be happier than I am now, despite the fact that my house is permanently a mess and I don't
That's
sleep well.
nothing.
Right. So, I mean, those are happy things, but I am a human. I have kids in the world, and so you interact with people of all types. And I hear gossip. I hear people talking, and the way they talk, reflects or sort of tells me what they might be unhappy about. Like the things that people tune into when they're
Right.
listening, or the things that people repeat. That they get fixated on is really a reflection of whatever inadequacy they think they have. And really, it seems to, the old adage, the grass is always greener. It seems to be something that a lot of people suffer from. I just never really suffered from it. And it can be such a toxic way to live and way to be. If
Yes.
you bring your problems everywhere you go, every life you're in, you're still with yourself. And so I don't know. I just think I'd feel so unsettled my whole life if I thought, should I have married him? Should I have taken this job? Should I have gone to live in California? But people do really think that way,
I know. There's a million choices. I think that's why the movie, I forget the title, Everywhere, Everything, All at Once,
Yeah, I
which
didn't see
spreads
that.
out all these, it spreads out all these different possibilities. And I think that can be a trap, because then you think you have a limitless amount of time and a limitless amount of possibilities, when actually you don't.
Right. I mean, I think
Oh,
the Midnight Library was a little bit about that now that I'm talking about that more explicitly, but yeah, I've listened to the audiobook recently.
okay, we're going to take some audience questions now. Ollie said his Wi-Fi was spotty,
Okay.
so Ollie, I'm going to read the questions, and if you're hearing me through your spotty Wi-Fi, you can put them up. Okay, so we have a question from Anissa Joy Armstrong. Hi, Anissa. Who was the hardest character to write in the book and why?
I think Jess was the hardest because I had a lot of sympathy for her, but on the surface, especially through the early drafts, she seemed like the villain. Um,
Really?
he, I think she wasn't coming off as sympathetic as, I mean, I was the only one reading it at this point, so that was my gut. But without giving things away, she does the sort of thing that society would find more difficult to forgive. Um, but that was part of my point is that no one knows what's going on inside someone
Right,
else's home, inside their relationship, inside their heart. And so I was fixated on making, writing fiction is like making an argument for something,
right.
just like critical writing is. It's like, I want you to come to this conclusion. And that, in this case, was find sympathy in your heart for Jess and everything she's gone through. And here is my evidence that you should do so. You know what I mean? And so, but I found her probably the more delicate. Malcolm was surprisingly tricky because, it's not easy to find sympathy sometimes for like the hot guy who has a lot of friends. Um,
Right.
he was like so opposite my last character, my last big male character in Ask Again Yes, was so closed off and had really no friends and was so internal. And I think Malcolm was sort of an antidote to that. But at times, to sort of reflect, he has those deep emotions, as I think everyone does, even if he doesn't seem that way. So there were tricky things around him too, but Jess was more difficult.
Okay. We have another question from Anissa, which is, do you start with characters, setting, or story? And has it been the same for you for all your books?
Character, always, always character. And I know it's time to begin when I see them sort of moving through the world, in a room having a conversation. I think like, what's going to happen here? But I always begin with character.
And what do you know now as a writer that you wish you had known just starting out?
How long
A
it's bad
lot, right?
before it's good? I mean, I guess it's the only thing I've learned is that it is really, really bad before it's good. And I think that sometimes I meet people and they're frustrated and they've written, several novels maybe that didn't go anywhere, and I wonder, like, did you write it enough? Did you
Right,
settle for that third, fourth draft? Just do it again and again and again, and maybe you'll get it. Or, you know, I think people would be really shocked. You read a book from beginning to end, and I'm getting texts from friends. I read it in one night. It's like, well, I cried over this for 3 years, but you gobbled it up in one night. That's great, but that is not the way it came out?
right, right,
So, but now I used to feel really disheartened when I realized maybe the last 75 pages of work just aren't right, and I would just chuck them. Now I know it's just part of the process, so I don't get quite as, like, defeated for a week like I used to. But that's really all I've learned.
So, would that be the best advice you'd give to new writers, or would there be something else?
I think actually the most important thing is to read. I'm shocked by the people who come up to me at readings and say, like, they're not reading, they're writing a lot or in workshops. They're writing and
Right,
writing, but you cannot write if you're not reading
right.
at the level that you wanna write. So, like, if you're reading crappy books, you're gonna write a crappy book. Um, so read to the level that you wanna write, read constantly, read everything, and just keep going.
Do you ever get writer's block?
I don't know what to call it. I get days or stretches where it's just not good. I don't ever get to a point where I can't write. I just know that it's, like, not going well. So then I like running. I think it goes with writing. So I'll take a day or 2 and just very purposely not write, go for a long run, scrub my house top to bottom, do weird things like that. And then I won't look at what I did before. I just start somewhere else. I like try to remember, where's the energy in the writing? Where's the energy in this scene? Why am I in this rut where I keep entering the room in this way? And so let's begin with this character already in the room, or he's sitting in a chair, or we're in a different room, or now he's taking a walk outside, something that just shakes it up and gives it like a breeze comes through the room. So I don't know if I totally believe in writer's block, or maybe I'm blocked all the time and it's just a struggle and I get it out. But there are days where the writing is very bad, or I can't get as many words out as I'd like, but it's just like sitting in the chair and trying and trying and trying.
Right, right. Can you talk at all about what you're working on now? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Without being coy, I mean, my answer for like a year is truly, I don't know. I know that it's not set in Gilliam. I have words down. I have had my father died a couple months ago. My uncles have passed. There's a lot going on. A lot of people around me, like it seems so sudden. And I'm in a big family. And so lately, you think of questions like that, but they're too big for a novel. Like I'm not a particularly religious person, but like, why are we here? And why do we mean so much to each other? And I don't know. It has something to, I don't know. I don't know what it's about, but I know that part of it will take place in New York. Part of it will likely take place in Montana, which is a place my dad was fixated by, but never got a chance to see. A lot of Irish actually ended up in Montana.
That's so strange.
I know. Butte, Montana in particular. I think they worked in the mines, that did that sort of thing. But yeah.
That's so strange. It always seems really interesting to me about what kinds of people end up in what kinds of places, because sometimes it doesn't seem to make sense. Okay. So you, who have this extraordinary sense of place in your work, place always seems to matter deeply to your characters and it shapes them. So I wanted to know, have you ever lived somewhere yourself that shaped you in a way that you weren't crazy about?
That's a great question. With no disrespect to the state of Virginia, I lived there for 4 years. I knew it was a place that was not for me. Please don't cancel me, Virginia. But, and I don't mean Northern Virginia. I mean, I was in Charlottesville, which was great. Charlottesville itself was, it felt like there were restaurants and shops and lectures and the UVA is there. But I also worked at Monticello for a while. And so I met more people from the community, and the people themselves were all great. And I've made lasting friendships. But there was like a vibe down there that I just, being from the North and being maybe first generation, I don't know. I just never felt, I just knew I was not of this place and I never would be. Weirdly, during that, we lived there for 4 years. During that period, we spent 4 months in Minneapolis because my husband got this like job at Target corporate is there. Minneapolis was the opposite for me. I loved it instantly. I thought I could live in Minnesota for the rest of my life. I don't know why those feelings. It's like meeting a person. Why, if two people check all the same boxes, why are you attracted to one and not the other?
It's the energy. I think it's just the energy. It's like something that immediately clicks with you. I felt that way when I moved from a suburb, which I truly disliked, to Manhattan. And the first moment I stepped in Manhattan, I knew. I said, this is my place. This is absolutely my place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always ask this question, and if anybody has any other questions. Oh, Carol Orange says, I felt the same vibe recently in Charleston, South Carolina. It does happen.
I love you, Virginia, but I don't want to live there.
So I always ask this question because I'm an obsessive person. What's obsessing you now and why?
That's a good question. It's usually such a weird thing. So I have no idea if this is going to end up in my new book, but I'm sort of obsessed right now with electric medicine. Is that probably not what you were expecting? But
no, that's interesting though.
Crazy about it, and how it, how weird it is, how I'm an English major, so I'm trying to understand science with my,
English
English
major,
major's
right?
brain. But my dad had pacemakers in his brain. He had Parkinson's for a long time, and he had deep brain stimulation. And so I think that's where I got interested. But now it's being used for so many things. And back in the back throughout history, electroshock therapy was, we always had, look at Cuckoo's Nest. Like we had such a bad association with it,
But it's good,
but it
actually.
works. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
it
was a shock
works.
to me. So I just read that, like, We Are Electric, I think it was called. I don't know. I heard her on NPR. I read the book, and then I've read a couple of other books that, like, I paid so much for because they, like, don't, it's like shipped from wherever, and I barely understand them, but um I don't know, there's something with that that's really interesting. And I think because my dad benefited from um those electrodes, I don't know, I think it's going to come up for me.
I think all of science is fascinating. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't have a scientific kind of mind, but
Me neither.
that didn't stop me from taking all these courses in college on science and primatology, and I wanted to go on digs. And of course, they would never let me because I was such a poor candidate for it. But it's totally fascinating.
It
It's
is.
totally, totally fascinating. Okay, so looks like we don't have any more audience questions. So I have one more question,
Okay.
which is what's a fact about you that most people don't know that you sort of wish they knew?
Oh, I'm a pretty open book with a lot of things. I don't know. I got asked this once and had a I don't know. I think I'm like an okay writer. I think I'm a champion parallel parker, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. There's nothing that I wish they knew. I really like running. I'm not that good at it, but I love it. I'm a very aggressive driver. I drive very fast. I love my car. I don't know. That's probably not what you mean. It's probably
No,
dumb.
but no, it is. Those are like kind of interesting things. Like just
So
like
like
that's what.
Scrivener, now I'm going on this big tour. They're like, we can set up trains and planes and drivers. I'm like, I would like to drive my own Honda everywhere, play my music, do my thing. I just love being in a car and driving. So I was meant for the suburbs, I
See,
think.
see, that's one of those small moments that says a lot because you love being in your car, you love driving. Oh, and I actually like, because I have one other question now that you're talking about music. Do you play music when you're writing? And if so, what was the soundtrack for the
Oh
Half
God,
Moon?
no. I don't play
No,
anything
you don't
when
play
I'm writing,
anything.
no. I
Okay.
blast music in the car and all day long, but not when I'm writing. No, total silence.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then. So I want to remind everybody who's here, please go to bookshop.org to buy The Half Moon, Ask Again Yes, Fever, every book you can of Mary Beth Keane, or Walk to Your Favorite Indie. Don't forget to go to GoFundMe with Mighty Blaze. Even if you just give $10, that'll help us keep the lights on. And also, thank you so much for coming here and for all the great questions. Really appreciate it. And finally, Mary Beth, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for answering all these questions.
Thank
Um,
you. Can I say
and
something quick? Thank you,
yes,
Caroline, for A Mighty Blaze. I think during the darkest part of COVID, it was like a real light. It really was. It was like
I'm glad
something
to
that
hear
we
that.
were like, there's a thing, there's a place we can talk about these books. Everything got canceled, and it just felt like, I don't know, it felt like a community that,
It was a community. It
yeah,
was, and the other thing about it is that I was working 20-hour days, but the good thing about it was I wasn't thinking about the pandemic.
right.
I was sort of in the future already planning, well, we'll do this, we'll
I
do this,
think a
do
lot
this.
of us really clung to it. And I did one of the early interviews, and people were all pitching in and trying to help. And I think
Yeah,
it
it's
was a great
great.
thing. Thanks for doing
It's
that.
truly a great thing. You are so welcome. And so we'll see everybody next time. And I'm going to say goodbye. And Mary Beth, you just hang on for